Yeah, we could start with the deaths. So 46, as you say, today. And so the number, this year, 359, is getting up toward the levels that we saw in the entire of last year through that long Delta wave. Of course, we did not expect to see death numbers as big as this. That was not what the modelling had suggested in really any state or territory around the country as we would open up the country post the long lockdowns of last year. But remember, that modelling was all based on Delta waves. And we saw how long the Delta waves that were experienced last year went for. What we're looking at the moment is really a compressed, very fast, much shorter wave of this virus with the Omicron variant. So that is part of the reason that we're seeing a much higher peak. So a shorter, taller wave rather than a longer, flatter wave of deaths. That is still, though, a bigger number than we're used to seeing in any state or territory. 46 deaths is a significant number, and obviously a lot of families really feeling the effects of this. You did mention hospitalisations as well, and we have some more good news there, which is the silver lining of today. Another drop in hospitalisations in New South Wales, down to 2,743. Intensive care admissions also down a little bit today, so that continues the pattern. Well, first a drop we saw yesterday, but really an accelerating slowing of the growth in admissions into this week, which we have been watching happen for a little while. It's just sped up in the last few days, and to the point now where that acceleration of hospital growth is now negative. We're seeing these numbers falling. So that is another good indication, some slightly firmer evidence that really this wave may be starting to subside in New South Wales. And the other positive thing I'll bring in is just the hospitalisations in Victoria, which have also fallen today, 1,096. They've been jittering about a bit for a few days, and a more significant fall today. So it may well be that Victoria is at a pretty similar point as New South Wales, maybe a couple of days behind, or if that, in terms of seeing this wave also subside. I've seen a few theories about why, given this wave took off later in Victoria, why it is that it might be peaking at about the same time. And one of the reasons could be, this is just a theory, could be that Victorians were double dose vaccinated a little bit later than people in New South Wales, so they've had less time for immunity to wane, and maybe that's had a little bit of an impact here as well. So that is the silver lining. In New South Wales, in Victoria, these waves, I'm not going to say they definitely are subsiding just yet, but the evidence is definitely firming that the peak may well be upon us.
And so, Casey, just talk to that in a bit more detail for us. What is the theory on the peaks in Australia now based on what we've seen overseas?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in New South Wales, what we're seeing in Victoria is pretty consistent with what we've seen elsewhere. I'll just go back to New South Wales for a second. Which has been a really short, sharp peak. Remember, we only learned of Omicron for the first time, I think it was the first week of December.
Yeah.
So we've known of Omicron for 6-7 weeks. Already, South Africa looks like it's kind of not just peaked, but really coming out of this Omicron wave. The scenario in London looks to be following the same trajectory. New York and New Jersey, places in the US that had very bad, very fast Omicron spikes, also look to be coming down, and that is consistent with what we're seeing here in Australia as well. This is a wave that is infecting a lot of people very quickly, a lot more people than are testing positive and being diagnosed with COVID-19, we should say as well. And because of that, it then, because it is just running out of people to infect in some parts, it is then subsiding relatively quickly as well. So a much taller, shorter wave is the experience of Omicron rather than Delta, which was, as we saw, a very drawn out experience, in part because of the public health controls that we had in place then with lockdowns as well. But the scenario we're seeing here, when you look at New South Wales Health Commission, that modelling released it earlier this month, looking at which scenarios New South Wales might closely resemble, and New South Wales looks to be coming out perhaps even slightly better than the South African experience. So a lower level of hospitalisations compared to South Africa even, which is a really positive sign to see. I think our vaccinations here have made a very good dent in the situation. So that is the silver lining. A lot of people have died, but at least the evidence is growing that this wave is starting to subside.